וכי נפשי אס השם
Today, page 97. Today, the day that Kipa'amayim, Ki Tov, Tuesday, 2 times the Torah said Ki Tov, it's good. So we're going to learn the not only fulfilling the mitzvah of the Torah, of study Torah, but also Ki Tov, twice good. We're going to learn many halachot, twice as much as usual. Mitzvah Hashem. First and foremost, we're going to zoom in, what we discussed yesterday, which is the mekoshesh, the one that gathered wood. What exactly involved there? Is that a me'amer? Is that kotzer? Is that someone who did hotza'ah with carrying from one domain to another? We're going to elaborate on that, and then we're going to speak about a specification when one carries from one domain to another, and zooming in with a practical halachot that apply to our times. We are at 96, 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Tanu Rabbanan, when we discussed the fellow that was wood gathered. Now the sages deep in and understand what involved with this. Let's refresh our memory for those who just join us. The Torah tells us in the book of Numbers, it was a fellow that gathered wood on Shabbat. So since he gathered wood on Shabbat, they brought him before Moses, and he brought it before Hashem, before God. And God said, sure enough, he deserved capital punishment, and the Torah said that that fellow was stoned. So since, in a way, we are not there to know the whole detail of that court case, we try to analyze the ramification that applies to our days, to our times. So there are several opinions what involved in that type of work, and what is the Torah tells us. The Torah is not speaking lashon hara, an evil gossip. The Torah wants to teach us an important lesson. There was one opinion that said that he cut or uprooted that wood pieces, and therefore he is under the category of tolesh or kotzer, that it's one of the avot melachot, one of the 39 type of work that was in a tabernacle. Another opinion, that by gathering the wood and piling it, it's another category of melacha, of work, that it's called me'amer, and that's what this wood gathered did. The key opinion hold that was not the case. The case was what? He carries it more than 4 cubits in a public domain. And we explained many times that when one carries any type of materials in a public domain more than 4 cubits, he is in violation of a biblical precept and a Torah law. So with that in mind, the rabbi said that since we discussed the wood gathered, now we go to the details. So they said the wood gathered, mekoshesh zet slof chad. The one who is the wood gathered, his name is slof chad. The Torah tells us that one of the fellow that died in the desert, and it was 5 daughters that approached Moshe Rabbeinu, and they asked him, what should we do with our father? The father died because of his sin, they said, and he is no son involved, and we want to know if we receive inheritance. And again the Torah said that Moses brought it before the Lord, etc., and it was explanation how they did receive part. For sure it was requested for part of inheritance in an upcoming spot in the land of Israel. So since the Torah described them as the daughter of a fellow by the name of Tzlofchad, so we said that the wood gathered was name is צלוף חד. וכן הוא אומר, and he said clearly in the book of Numbers chapter 15, ויהיו בני ישראל במדבר וימצאו איש מקושש עצים ביום השבת. The children of Israel were in a desert and they discovered a fellow that gathered wood on the holiday of Shabbat. So just as a side note, I want to remind you that when it's come to Shabbat, we have three different categories. We have a category of someone who did on Shabbat melacha, some type of work, and that fellow was warned by two people. Two witnesses was there. So it was two witnesses, condition number one, and it was hatra'ah, he was warned. So if that's the case, then he received the highest punishment, which was skila, stoning. Then we go to the second category of someone who did it but does not have those conditions, such as it wasn't a witnesses, or he did something that only God and him knows. That's under a different category that it's called karet. Karet means, the Torah used the word, that soul shall be cut off. So it means that it's some heavenly punishment connected between the Almighty and that person. But again, we speak here about the second category, which is something that the person did intentionally. The third category, which we studied in the past, is someone who did unwittingly, which means unintentionally. That under the category which called shogeg. And shogeg, which is unwittingly, he only need to do what? To bring a sin offering. So here we have the story of Tzlof Chad, that he was in a severe punishment, which is the skila. And now we mention the name. So how do you know that Tzlof Chad is the one who wood gathered? They learn it from one of the 13 principles of Rabbi Ishmael. You know, every morning we mention the 13 principles of Rabbi Ishmael. And one of them is called Gzeira Shava, which means we take two words in the Torah in two different locations, we juxtapose the two words and make it as a mechanism, as one concept, and in that way we are able to do what? To learn from one subject to another the same concept. So how? So because they said that the children of Israel were in a desert and it was a man that gathered wood. Now remember the word Bamidbar, the desert, Ul Halanu Omer, and later in the book of Numbers chapter 27 they said that the daughter of Tzlof Chad came and they said Avinu met Bamidbar, our father died in a desert. So since they used the word desert twice in two different locations, so we learn in a concept it's called Gzeira Shava, juxtaposition in the context. Ma lehalan tzlof chad, afkan tzlof chad divrei Rabbi Akiva. So what did Rabbi Akiva tells us? He said, since it's written the first time the word tzlof chad, where when the daughter of tzlof chad, the Torah said, came and approached Moshe Rabbeinu, and they used the word Bamidbar, in a desert, and since in a early stage they said that it was in a desert when a fellow was stoned, and as you know the Torah is very prudent in word and is no such a thing as superfluous words. So therefore by juxtaposition of the word Bamidbar in two different locations, Rabbi Akiva learned that though the fellow that did the wood gathering was Tzlof Chad. Clear? Okay. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera, was another giant sage that responded to Rabbi Akiva, and he said to him, Akiva, they called each other by the first name. He said, Ben kach uven kach ata atid liten et adin. That's a very strong word. He said to him, regardless if you right in your assumption or not, you're going to pay for that. You're going to give an account, to give a judgment for mentioning his name, for this statement of his name. How come? He said, HaTorah kisato ve'ata megaleoto. Since the Torah in the book of Numbers, chapter 15, sentence 32, the Torah said, and the children of Israel were in the desert, and they found the food gathered, their wood gathered. So the Torah said clearly, desert, wood gathered, but the Torah covered his name. The Torah did not mention his name. So how come you, a great Rabbi Akiva, go out and publicize it? Another option, ve'im lav, and if what you're saying is absolutely true, right? I'm sorry, and if you're saying and it's absolutely not true, which means that the wood gathered was not slofchad, so you're going to give it judgment, you're going to give it account. Why? Because if it was Shomer Shabbos, if it was a Shabbat observance, ata motzi laz al oto tzadik. You're basically doing a blasphemy. You defame the character of whom? Of these righteous men. So if you didn't violate Shabbat, the GEMARA call him tzaddik, because the daughter said ki bechet omet, because of sin he died. So maybe he did something unintentionally, maybe he did a how do you call it, takadilo, a small sin, but not so severe that purposely with warning and everything he violated Shabbat. So how come you say it? Turn the page, 87a, ve'ela hagamar gzeira shava. So the GEMARA said, but Rabbi Akiva, it's not just he made a statement, he made a strong case because he used the term of gzeira shava, which is take two words and juxtapose them. So because he used the word bamidbar twice, it means that Slofchad was the one who did the wood gather, and the Torah did not cover that. That's what Rashi said. So what's the problem of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera that he challenged what Rabbi Akiva said, that the Torah covered and he is now revealed it? So the Sfat Emet said, just as a side note, he said that because the Torah used the word in a desert, on the purpose, he hold that that's the reason, that the Torah in a way wanted to make this Gzera Shabbat. You know, we said it many times, that there is a part in the Torah that it's clear and lucid and revealed, and there is a part that it's an oral teaching that we considering as incorporate part of the Torah, and one of them is the idea of Gzera Shabbat. Now, the problem is that we have the rule that a person cannot make Gzera Shabbat by himself. In other words, you and I cannot take two words in the Torah and say, oh, here is a juxtaposition that learn from both places and make it happen. That's not something that we do. The giant sailors, they did it at that time. So they said, Gzeira Shava lo gamar. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera did not hold that that is Gzeira Shava. So Tosfot here elaborate on that and said, why not he received it in a tradition from Rabbi Akiva, that he received it from his teacher, etc., etc. So they said that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera has the list of the Gzera Shava that he made, and Tosfot said that that was not in his list. It was like in addition to his list. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera did not receive that, did not accept it, what Rabbi Akiva said. Okay? Some Rishonim said that that statement not even go to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera, it's go to Rabbi Akiva, that he did not accept the he just make it as a drasha, as learning. Anyway, Ela meheicha hava. So now think together with me. Since you said that the wood gathered, you, meaning who? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera, you said that wood gathered is not slofchad. So now the rabbi is asking, so you tell me why slofchad died. The Torah said clearly, ki bechet o med, that he died because of his sin. Bechet o, the Maharsha said, it means that it's a known, well-known sin. So since it's a well-known sin, tell me. I want to learn something that maybe helped me with my life. So the Gemara answered and they said, Mi ve'ya'apilu hava. The Torah tells us a famous story of the spies. And then as a result, Moshe Rabbeinu, the whole story of he was angry at them, and that generation received a strong admonition and curse, and they said that they will die in the desert, etc. Right after that, it was a story of Ma'apilim, a group of people that try to, even Moses said that you're going to die in the desert, they try to do what? To go out and go at the top of the mountain and go to Eretz Israel. So as a result, because they are again rebellious against Moses, they die. So one of those Ma'apilim, it was him. How basically they die? It was those nations that attacked them, the Torah said. So because he was one of those Ma'apilim, which is much smaller sin compared to the intentional violating of Shabbat, that's the reason they said. So in other words, why Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera was opposing Rabbi Akiva's opinion, it's because he held that what Tzlofchad did was a small sin of being part of Ma'apilim, and not the sin of wood gather, which is a strong violation of Shabbat. The Sfat Emet brought a lot of hidden proof to Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera that was the sin of Tzlofchad. So again, you can go either way, what exactly involved. Now, since we have this discussion between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, the GEMARA continued and said, Kayotze badavar, also in regards to reveal the sin of Tzlofchad. Ata Omer, it's written in regard to Miriam and Aaron, the two brother and sister of Moshe Rabbeinu, that they committed a sin by speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu lashon hara, vayichar af Hashem bam vayelach. The wrath of Hashem, the God was angry at them, and God in a way stay away from them. And then the Torah said that right away Miriam received a leprosy. So, but the Torah used the word bam. Bam meaning it's a plural. Melamed she'af Aharon nitztara, which means it was not only Miriam who received the leprosy, but also her brother Aharon. Ooh, who said it? Again, Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, the same statement. Akiva ben kach uben kach ata atid liten din. He said, regardless if you're right or wrong, you're going to give a judgment for revealing or saying that Aaron received a leprosy the same as Miriam. Im kidvarecha, if you're saying the truth that Aaron received a leprosy the same as Miriam for speaking lashon hara or hear lashon hara about their brother Moshe Rabbeinu, so the Torah is basically hide it, conceal it, and you are Torah kisato v'ata megale oto, and you are revealed it to public while the Torah didn't want to, because the Torah only mentioned Miriam. V'im lav, but if you are wrong about it, ata motzi la'az al oto tzaddik, you basically slander, you defame the character of the righteous Aaron. So now the Gemara asks a question, ve'ela haktiv bam, but the Torah said it clearly. They said to Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, why are you so angry at Rabbi Akiva? He says, the Torah said clearly the word bam, bam meaning more than one person, is in a plural. So they said, no, ahu bin zifa be'alma. It's apply only to the state of warning, to the state of saying to him, no, don't do it. Which means the idea that Miriam was punished more than Aharon, Maharsha said, it's because she was the one who opened the conversation. But nothing more. So they said, well, Rabbi Akiva got it. So they said, Tanya keman de amar, af Aharon itztara. we can bring a source that Aaron also receive a leprosy. How? The Ktiv, because it's written there in a sentence 10, Vayifen Aaron el Miriam v'inem etzorat, which means Aaron turned to his sister Miriam, and he noticed that she have a leprosy. So if she have a leprosy, because they use the word Vayifen, that Aaron turned, meaning Shepana mitzaraato, which means that whenever he turned to her, he was already healed from his leprosy. So it means that because she opened the conversation, she have a longer leprosy more than her brother. In that sense, Aaron has it for a short period of time. And because Aaron noticed that he was healed from his leprosy and his sister not, then he turned around, and that's the reason why the Braita said that Aaron received a leprosy. So since we talk about all this discussion of the two brother and sister, talk about another brother, Lashon Hara, and they suspected him, so they said, Amar Reish Lakish, HaChoshed Beksherim Lokeh Begufo. If someone suspects and the innocent for things, you say something or you're thinking about somebody but you are wrong, is afflicted in his body. Why? Because they said Dichtiv, because it's written in Moshe Rabbeinu, Vehen lo yaminu li. When Hashem asked him, you remember in the parsha we just read in the Torah, Hashem asked him to go and speak to children of Israel, etc., and he said, they're not going to believe me. V'gal yakamei dekud shabrichu demehem Israel. But Hashem knew in advance that the children of Israel is going to believe Moshe Rabbeinu. Amar lo, so Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hen ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. The children of Israel are people of faith and children of people of faith. Ve'ata en sofcha le'amin. But you is going to be the person who have lack of faith. How? Hen ma'aminim dichtiv vayamenam. They are the people of faith because after Moshe Rabbeinu told them about his mission, they said that people trusted him and believed him. B'nei ma'aminim ve'emin ba'Hashem, because the Torah said about Abraham, when Hashem told him that he is going to have a future generation, even Abraham at that age was in a very old age, he trusted God. However, ata you, Moshe Rabbeinu, ein sofcha le'amin. שנאמר, יא לא האמנתם בי. So you meaning Moshe Rabbeinu, when it's come to all this rebuke of Mei Meriva, of the water that they have a big to do over that, so they said in the book of Numbers chapter 20, he said, יא לא האמנתם בי, which means Moshe Rabbeinu suspected with the people who was not basically deserve that they are that they don't trust in him. He thought that they have no faith. Umimai delaka. So how do you know that one who suspects the innocence afflicted is in body, like Moshe Rabbeinu? How do you know? They said, Dechtiv vayomer lo od havena bechekecha. You remember we read in the Torah portion of last week that when Moshe Rabbeinu said they're not going to believe me, Hashem gave him few signals. One of them, Hashem told him to bring his hand to his chek, to his part of the body, and pull it out. So what happened? He pulled it out and he saw v'nei yado metzorat kashaleg. He saw his hand. It has a leprosy like snow. That is, so it means that Moshe received a leprosy. So, and it was because he didn't trust them. He suspected them that they are going to be people with no faith. So, by the way, that was not the Shildod Rav Achai Gaon said that was not the whole case. It was twice when Hashem asked him to get in and out. So only one time it happens because it's just a signal that Hashem wants to give him, and it wasn't full state of regular disease that the person have for a certain period of time. So now bringing another drasha in regard to tzaraat of leprosy of Moshe Rabbeinu. Amar Rava v'itema Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Chanina, midat tova memaheret lavo mimidat po'anut, which means that the effect that the person have, especially midat tova, something good that come to the righteous people, is much faster than something that it's attribute of punishment, something bad. דאילו במידת פורענות כתיב ויוציאה והנה ידו מצורעת כשלג, in something that it's attribute of punishment. They say that Moshe pulled it out and he noticed that his hand has a leprosy like snow, right? ואילו במידת טובה כתיב, but in regards to Moshe Rabbeinu's healing, it's written there in Pasuk Zayin in sentence 7, ויוציאה מחיקו, and Moshe took out from his bosom, and behold, והנה שבה כבשרו, and it returned to like the original flesh. So now the GEMARA analyzed it, and they said, מחיקו hu דשבה כבשרו, from his bosom that is returned to be like his original flesh, which means that Moshe Rabbeinu's hand was healed even before he took his hand out. So we learn from that midat tova, that the attribute of a benefit of something good come quicker than the attribute of punishment. So that's, by the way, we learn from that. The Maharal said that Hashem doesn't want to punish the sinners. Hashem just wants to wake them up. And sometimes the minute they woke up, all the disease disappear. So it's just a signal. If they get a signal, so they get better. So now the GEMARA concluded with another drasha, and they said, the Rif explained the connection between the drashot. Vayivla mate Aaron et matotam. Again, it's the Torah portion we read that Moshe Rabbeinu Hashem commanded him to put his staff before Pharaoh, and that staff turned to be a scorpion. But when Aaron did it, what happened is Pharaoh called of his magicians, and they did the same. However, the Torah said that the staff of Aaron swallowed all the staff of Pharaoh magicians. Amar Rabbi Elazar, nes betoch nes. Beautiful. Rabbi Elazar said that it was miracle within the miracles. Why? Because first this staff turned to be staff after it was a scorpion. And the second one is that that staff swallow what? Not other scorpion, but swallow other staff of those magicians. So, because they didn't say Vayivla tanin Aaron, the scorpion of Aaron swallowed. They said Vayivla mate Aaron, the staff was swallowed. So you see that it's the miracle within miracle. Now we're back to our subject in the Mishnah. Mirshut hayachid lershut hayachid. If someone throw an item from a private domain to another private domain, and what we said in the Mishnah, we said that if in between we have a public domain, so Rabbi Akiva make him liable and the sages exempt him. By Rabbah asked a question. Lemata me'asarat tfachim. As we remember, when we define each domain, we said that the Reshut HaRabim, the public domain, if it's above the 10 handbreadth, right? So then that status turn to be Mekom Ptur, a place that is exempt. But if we throw that item and it's below the 10 handbreadth, so they said Ubeha Plige. That's really the machloket between Rabbi Akiva and the sages. The Mar Savar that Rabbi Akiva hold Amrinan Kluta Kema Shehuncha, he said that the one, it's the airspace, it's considered as rest, which means even he started with the domain of private and he threw it to another domain that is also private, but the second domain he considered the same as a person put it in his hand. In other words, all the airspace, it's part of that action. Umar Savar, and the sages hold, lo amrinan kluta kema shuncha. So they say that it's only one part. You remember we said in order to do something that make a person liable, he needs to do both akira and anacha, or here is hotza'a and achnasa. And here, since it was only one action of throwing, so you don't have both. Aval lemala ma'asara tfachim. But if it's above 10 handbreadth, divrei hakol patur. Everyone agree that one is exempt. Velo yalfinan zorek mimoshit. And we do not derive the legal status of throwing from the legal status of what? Of passing. So that's basically the explanation of different opinion between Rabbi Akiva and Chachamim, or Dilma, or you may say the other way around. Lemala ma'asara pligei. The whole this agreement between Rabbi Akiva and the sages applied to what? If it was above 10 handbreadth from the ground. Ubehaplige, and this is their machloket, the disputation. The Mar Savar Yalfinan Zorek Bimoshit, that one said that we learn the one who throwing from the one of passing. Umar Savar Lo Yalfinan Zorek Bimoshit, and the other one hold that we not derive the one who throwing from one who passing. Aval, however, Lemata Me'asara, but if it's below the 10 handbreadth, Divrei hakol chayav, everyone said that one, he is liable. My tama, what's the reason that even the sages hold that one who's throw, he is liable? Kluta kemi sheuncha damya. Then object in the airspace is considered as a rest. So and you hold him liable that it's only up in the air. So it's the two ways that Rabbi here have an issue with this machloket. One, if we hold kluta is the same as huncha, point one, and we learn that we cannot learn the one who throw to one who passes. And the second question is that if you learn the one who throw from one who passes, and we agree that kluta, that they throw the same as huncha, so now we do learn one who throw from one who passes. So here you have an issue how you learn it. So the truth is that there are many avenues to understand this machloket. The Sfat Emet, the Ritva, and many other Meforshim have a different avenue to understand this machloket. But Rav Yosef come here and explain to us, he tried to come out with the idea. Rav Yosef Hamilta Ibayla le Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda has this quandary. Upashat nihalei Rav Nuna meha, and Rav Nuna learned from where? מרשות היחיד לרשות היחיד ועובר ברשות הרבים עצמה. That it was between private domain, and in between is a public domain. Rabbi Akiva מחייב וחכמים פותרים. Rabbi Akiva make him liable, the sages exempt him. מי דקאמר ברשות הרבים עצמה? Since you tell me that item passed through the public domain itself, פשיטא למטה מעשרה טפחים פליגה. So it's clear that their disputation is what? If it's below the 10 handbreadths, ubemai, and what's the type of situation this writer speaks? Ileima bema avir. If you tell me that one who passed, it's the same, you hold that this is some person just physically passed that item and carry it. So they said, wait a second, if you tell me that, lemata ma'asara u de mechayev, lemala ma'asara lo mechayev. So only below the 10 handbreadth you make him liable. Above not. ואמר רבי אלעזר said clearly, המוציא מסוי למעלה מעשרה, if someone carry from one domain to another a burden that it was above 10 handbreadths from the ground, Chayav is liable. Sheken, how do you learn it? Masab bnei Kehat, when you have the story, again in the Torah, that the sons of Kehat, which is the grandchildren of the tribe of Levi, they used to carry the Holy Ark, and they used to do it on the shoulder, and it was above the 10 handbreadth from the ground. So you have to say that it's applied to what? To someone who's throwing it. Where? How? Excuse me, למעלה מ10 הוא דמחייב. Only if it's above, that was the opposite way. If it's above the 10 handbreadth, then you tell me that he is liable. למעלה מ10, I'm sorry, למטה מ10 הוא דמחייב. Below than 10, he is liable. Later we say the opposite. And above the 10, he is לא מחייב. It's like מקום פטור, he's exempt. שמע מינה, we learn from this brighter, בקלותה כמה שונך פליגי. So you learn from that בקלותה, that even it's a receive it is the same as you pass it in your hand. שמע מינה, and that's basically the way that we learn it. The object in the airspace is considered at rest as they are as they disagree. Now, Upliga de Rabbi Lazar, and this conclusion disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Lazar. That's what I try to say. The Amar Rabbi Lazar, Lazar hold Mechayev ya Rabbi Akiva afilu lemala ma'asara. You see, Rabbi Akiva hold that one is liable even it's past the airspace of 10 handbreadth. And what we learn that this is a separate domain, as a public domain. They want to show you the far-reaching nature of the opinion of the rabbis who deem one exempt even if the object travel in the public domain itself, and for sure if it's above the 10 handbreadth, which is no longer within the bound of a public domain. The Amar Rab Chilkia Bar Tovi, in regard to one who throw an item from private domain to private domain, and the public domain is in between, that if it was toch shlosha, if it was in between the 3 handbreadth from the ground of the public domain, divrei kol chayav, everyone say that he is liable. Why? Because it's within the 3 handbreadth. Even it wasn't arrested physically. So Rashi explained that it's part of the idea of a rule that's called lavud, which we learn mishlosha ad 10, from 3 handbreadth to 10. Banu lemachloket Rabbi Akiva Rabbanan. Now the big machloket is only between 3 to 10 handbreadth. If we take kluta kmi shuncha or kluta kmi or not. Tani lam yachi. Betoch shlosha, if it's within the 3 handbreadth from the ground, divrei kol chayav, everyone said that one who throw is liable. למעלה מ10, if it's above the 10 handbreadth, אינו אלא משום שבות. The only reason is due to a rabbinic decree that the sages prohibited throwing or passing an object from the private domain of one person to set to the private domain of another person, unless they have the joining yard. ואם היו רשויות שלו מותר מ3 עד 10, so if this domain of his is permitted between 3 handbreadth and up to the 10 handbreadth from the ground, so Rabbi Akiva mechayev, Rabbi Akiva hold that he is liable, והחכמים פותרים, they don't hold תלותה כמו שהונחה. אמר מר, now we go zoom in, and he said, אם היו רשויות שלו מותר, if both private domain belong to the same owner, so he can, at the first place, can throw from one domain to another, even there is a public domain in between. So now we ask a question, let me have to the Rav. That's a contradicted to what Rav said earlier. Dietmar, now it's another place that Rav said, שני בתים בשני צידי רשות הרבים. If there are 2 houses, 2 buildings, in 2 different locations in the public domain, רבא בר אבונה אמר רב אסור לזרוק מזה לזה. One hold that you cannot throw from one domain to another. ושמואל, that's very important what Shmuel said, ושמואל אמר מותר לזרוק מזה. So you allow, you have the same owner, Mr. A, that he owns both properties in across the street from one another. So since he is the same owner, or the Shulchan Aruch said in Shinun Gimel in 353, if they are Eruvei Chatzerot between the two parties, which are bodies, right? So in that case, you allow Shmuel all to throw an item from one domain to another. And Rashi said that even though that is the Erev Eruvei Chatzerot, still Rav forbade it. So now it's contradicted to what Rav said earlier. So the Gemara answered and said, "Velav miukim alei." That contradiction, that dispute between Rav and Shmuel, we hold kegon de mid leichad umitat eichad. It means that one building is high and another building is low. So it means that that person has to be a basketball player, because he knew clearly. He have to figure out, they have to think clearly how to throw that item and hit the spot either high or below. And because he's so preoccupied with that, right, he just figured out how to throw it to the correct place. The zimni nafal, sometimes that item will throw so he realized that he threw it to the wrong location. Well, now it is where in a public domain, and now the person who threw it, so what are you going to do? So he will go and bring it from the public domain, and he violated the Torah prohibition. Because the idea of throwing the item, it's not the decree. The only idea is that after he throw, he go and carry from one domain to another. That's what Rashi said and Rashba said and more. Now, there is a din we learn in regard to lavud. So we say that if it's lavud, it's above the 3 hand breadth, so it's considering as the public domain. So Amar le Rav Chizda le Rav Amnuna v'Amre le Rav Amnuna le Rav Chizda. So from where the sages said that any object less than the 3 hand breadth is considered to be lavud attached. So it's because anything that it's in a distance of less than 3 hand breadths from others, it's considered like it's attached to something. So if they have something like a little gavshushit, something it's a little high in a public domain, but it's less than 3 hand breadth, so it's already considered part of the public domain. So he said, because it's impossible for the public domain to be made level with plants. Why? Because the spot cannot be absolutely straight, so even a little bit different between the ground level in the public domain, so it's you have to take it as because let's face it, most of the public domain, they have those high and low. So if that's the case, Roshanami, so even 3 it should hold as a public domain. The 2 is another idea that we learn in Tractate Sukkah, page 16a. If someone prepares his sukkah and he put the wall of the sukkah from the schach down, and he is sewing it down, if it's above the ground 3 hand breadth, so psula. Why? Because you remember we said in the sukkah they have to have walls that get attached or close to attach to the ground. But if still have less than 3 hand breadth from the ground, it's not the way that we lechatchila wish to have the sukkah, but b'diavad we say that okay, so it's still valid. Hatam, so now it's contradicted the whole idea of lavud, that we said that in a 3 hand breadth is an issue. So hatam aynu tama mishum dav lemechitza shagdeim bokim ba. The issue is that you have this little kid that can come in and get in the sukkah, so that's not enough. But here it's a different, because the 3 it cannot make the partition valid. Teinach lemata, this apply only to a space less than 3 hand breadth between the sukkah to the ground. But however lemala, but if it's in the schach or in the top of those walls, how do you learn? So they said ela kol pachot mishlosha kelavud damei hilcheta gmirela. That we learn halacha leMoshe miSinai, which means we learn throughout the tradition that anything that is less than 3 is considered lavud, And that's we learn through our tradition. Tanu Rabbanan. מרשות הרבים לרשות הרבים ורשות היחיד באמצע. Now the opposite ways was a public domain, and in between is a private domain. So Rabbi מחייב החכמים פותרים. Rabbi said that this is הכנסה and הוצאה because it's considering it's like you put the space and הנחה in between the public domain. And the sages said no, as long as they physically that item not stay in the public domain, it's not the issue. Rav Shmuel Damrit Ravav. Now we explain what's both of them. Rav Shmuel hold lo chiev Rabbi la b'rshut hayachid mekora. He hold that the only public domain, a private domain, that they have a mekora, that they have some type of a roof on that. Damrinan bita keman demal yadame. That it's like a house filled of items, so it's like no space, no air there. So therefore, if you throw an item, it's considered as part, it's part of both domains, the same. Aval she'eno mekora lo. But if it's something without roof, so it's not considering as a filled up, and it's not, and therefore you don't any item that passed through, it's not considering as munach as was there. Another, Amar Rav Chana Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel mechayev atahara b'shtayim. That Rabbi hold that one will throw an item from public to public domain, while in between it was a private domain. He hold that person need to bring a 2 sin offering. Achat mishum hotza'ah ve'achat mishum achnasa. One for carrying out from a private domain into a second public domain, and one for carrying it when the object initially entered the private domain. Yativ Rav Chana ve'kakashile. So Rav Chana heard that, and he have a difficult with him. Just turn to 97b. We have a category and we have subcategory. So Rabbi hold that a subcategory of something that is prohibited labor. So when someone did it, it's considering as together with primary labor. So it's a big question, because sometimes it's we don't hold that way. V'hatanya Rabbi Omer, in regards to walk on Shabbat, they said in Exodus 35, Dvarim hadvarim. We learned the word Devarim, we learned the word Hadvarim. And the ed, the superfluous, looks like a letter Hey. Eile Hadvarim. Because the word Eile, which is 36 in numerical value, so it means another 36. ואלו 39 מלאכות שנאמרו למשה מסיני. These are the 39 type of work of labor that was given to Moses in Sinai, which means in our tradition the whole purpose of the Torah is to teach us that the maximum of 39 type of sin offering a person needs to give. Amar Rav Yosef, he respond to Rav Chana question, Mar aha matnela v'kasha le'adei Rabbi Rabbi. You teach us this member of Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel, and therefore it's contradicted one thing that the Rabbi said and another one. Anan de Rabbi Yehuda matnitan velo kashelan. We learn the statement of Rabbi Yehuda with regard to opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore is no difficulty for us. The Tanya. Now we learn the Braita. מרשות היחיד לרשות הרבים ועבר ברמות ברשות הרבים. If it was a private domain to a public domain and it passed through a 4 cubits, so if in a public domain. Rabbi Yehuda מחייב החכמים פותרים. Rabbi Yehuda hold that he is liable, and the sages free. And now soon we explain why. אמר רבי יהודה אמר שמואל מחייב, אתה רבי יהודה 2, אחד משום הצעה ואחד משום העברה. Rabbi Yehuda hold that you need to bring 2 sin offering, one because of הוצאה, pulling out, and one because it's passing. This because if you tell me that it's only one thing that he is liable, it means that the sages is exempt totally. But initially what did he do? He pulled it from private to public domain. How come? Maybe I'll tell you Rabbi Yehuda only hold that is one. And the sages exempting totally. Give me an example. When it is a situation that he said, my intention is that as soon as the object goes out into a public domain, it will immediately come to rest. Again, this is the machloket. The Rabbi Yehuda said that an object in an airspace is considered as at rest, and therefore his intention is fulfilled. And because that's intention, you know that in Shabbat we are very match with the intent of a person. So whatever he intends, it fulfills, because the minutes that the subject entered to the airspace, so it's a public domain, it's considered that it's like it's rest there. The Rabbanan say, the sages said, no, an object of the airspace is not considering at rest, it's just in the air, right? And therefore his thought did not fulfill, his intention not fulfill. But Rabbi Yehuda hold, in other words, if it's a subcategory with the category, he doesn't hold that the person is liable for labor performed with primary category of labor. So the GEMARA said, "Lo sagadata Tanya." It could not enter to your mind because you think the Tanya Rabbi Yehuda mosif af shovet v'medakdek. Shovet in tet, with tet, not with taf. Shovet u'medakdek, which means Rabbi Yehuda add even a lining up the thread of the wrap and beating the thread of the woof to the list of primary category of labor. Amrulo, so the sages said, lining up. Hashovet arei bechlal meisech. One of the subcategory, it means subsum under the stretching or the thread to wrap the loom. And they said, my love, that what happened is beating the subsum under the category of weaving. Why? Because both lining and beating together. Rabbi Yehuda hold that even he did a subcategory. The subcategory, one who did liable for both, not only for the primary category, but also the subcategory, he performed together, he make him liable. The GEMARA rejected it and said, Mimai, why it's this hechreach, why you have to say this proof? You may say that he did each of them separately. Rabbi Yehuda don't hold that that the person is liable for doing subcategory with the category. This is the real disputation between them. Rabbi Yehuda maintain that this action of lining up and beating are additional primary category. The sages hold maintain that these are subcategory. Teida, as a conclusion, and I keep saying that if you have the time, please go and see all the meforshim. Running out of time, such as the Khatam Sofer have a lot to say here. Teida, you should know. When we say that Rabbi Yehuda add, so if you tell me that this apply to primary category, my mosif avod, what he adds the primary category of what? Of labor. If you tell me that he adds what? The subcategory, my mosif, what did he add? Rabbi Yehuda deem only one sin offering. So in other words, if he did more like category and subcategory, he hold only one sin offering. How do you know? How do you come to the point that Rabbi Yehuda hold that you need to give two sin offering? If you want to one way, here you cannot say that it's a public domain, the beginning of the public domain. And if you say that there's 4 cubits in the other, is again not public domain. He once said that any place that it wants to come to rest, let him come to rest. So it means that his intention, when he throw that item, whatever the item land, that's the place land. So therefore, he is liable for 2. Pshita. So they said, if that's the case, it's obvious. Why? If someone intends to throw in what? To throw an object to 8 cubits in a public domain, and actually throw it to 4 cubits. So it's the same as someone wrote, you know, the Hebrew word Shimon, Simon. You write Shimon, Shin Mem Ayin Vav Nun. So if someone will write the word Shin Mem, so what happened? Shin Mem, it's also a word. Shem, it's also a word. It's not the word of Shimon, but it's still it's word. It's independent word. So because we said in the Mishna in 73 that in the shiur to someone who is liable for writing, it's even 2 letters. So writing Shem, Shin Mem, it's enough. So even he intend to write a long letter, which is Shin Mem Ayin Vav Nun, and he wrote only Shin Mem, he's still liable. That's what Rashi said. So therefore, So here, נתכוון לזרוק 4 וזרק 8 מהו? If one intend to throw it to 4 cubits and he end up by doing 8, so what's the din? מי אמרינן הפקלה? Do you say that since he lifted? או דילמה איך דבאי הלונח? But it's not rested. ולאו היינו דאמר לרבינה לרבשי ואמר לה באומר כל מקום שתרצה תנוח, we just said that he just said that any place they want to rest, let them rest. So in such a scenario one is liable because here is the reality that he intend with any labor will be performed with this subject. So now you just said וכדאמרת הרי כתב שם משמעון, he wrote just שם from שמעון and it was also 2 אותיות, 2 letters. מדמה, how do you juxtapose, how do you compare the two? התאמה דלא כתיב שם, לא מכתיב לשמעון. You cannot write the word שמעון without writing שין מם. Right? So therefore, הרא כמה דלא זריק 4 לא מזדרקל את מנה. So here, it is true that as long as it was not thrown 4 cubits, it cannot be thrown 8. So an object that is thrown 8 cubits without first landing after the 4 cubits. So again, you stay with the question that unresolved. Tanu Rabbanan, so the sages taught, and now we concluded our learning. For today, hazorek mirshut harabim lirshut harabim v'rshut yachid ba'emtza 4 amot chayav. If someone throw an item between public domain to public domain, and in between is a private domain, so if it passed total of 4 cubits in both parts in a public domain, so he is liable. פחות מ400 פטור, but if it's less than 4 cubits, he's exempt, because it's neither way, neither one. That's what Rashi said. My kamashmalan, what do we derive from that? What is teaching us? Hakamashmalan reshuyot mitztarfot. That we learn, number one, that they join, the domain can join together, which means even there is a separation between the domains, you can join because there is a private domain in between, but as far as the halakha, we treat it as considering as one domain. And the second conclusion is that we do not say that an object in the airspace is considered at rest. First discussion we have about one who throw an object מרשות היחיד לרשות הרבים לרשות היחיד ועובר ברשות הרבים, private to private domain, and it's passed to a public domain. So this is the Rambam Hilchot Shabbat chapter 13. Excuse me. One who throws an object from private domain to another private domain toward a public domain is liable if the object passes within the 3 handbreadths of the ground and it lands of any surface even for a moment. This is the Rambam's opinion. He rules that the opinion of Rava, we said, which maintain that according to rabbis, even if the object is within 3 handbreadths of the ground, it must land on some surface in order for the one who throw it to be liable. Rabbeinu Hananel and Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman Ramban rule that if the thrown object passes within 3 handbreadths of the ground, it's considered to have landed, even if it does not come to rest at all. In their opinion, Rabbi Chilkiah Bar Tovi disagree with Rabbah, and the halakha is accorded with his opinion. If the object passes between 3 and 10 handbreadths from the ground, the one who throws it is exempt. If the object passes through the public domain in airspace above 10 handbreadths from the ground, the one who throws it is violated the rabbinic prohibition unless the 2 private domain belong to him, or, as we said earlier, if the eruvei chatzirot, if they make he and his body together an eruv. Now we said that in conjunction to that, the Rambam said in Hilchot Shabbat chapter 15 and Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim in the 353 said, Shnei batim b'shnei tzidei reshut harabim. You have 2 houses across the street in a public domain. So it's permitted on Shabbat to throw an object, Magen Avraham said, more than 10 handbreadths from the ground between 2 houses that are on either side of a public domain, if they belong to one person, or even if they belong to different people who establish a joining of courtyard between them, eruvei chatzerot. However, This ruling applies only when the two houses are the same height, or when the object that is thrown is so fragile that if it fell, it will break and one will not retrieve it. You remember, because the issue is that if you throw in the wrong location, then it goes down and pick it up. This stipulation is in accordance with the conclusion of the GEMARA here, and also in the Tractate Eruvin. Now, how about if there is a public domain and the private domain in between? So one would throw an object more than 10 handbreadths from the ground from one public domain to another via private domain is exempt. That's what's the majority of the opinion of the rabbi. We also talk about shovet and we talk about medakdek. Shovet and medakdek, so it means that one is lining up and beating. One is lining up, which means straightening the threads of the wrap and for beating the thread and separating them, doing the weaving process on Shabbat. Lining up is a subcategory of primary category of stretching the thread of the wrap, while beating is subcategory of primary category of weaving. Now, if we intend to do 8 and he actually throw only 4 cubits, so they said, if one intended to throw an object 8 cubits in a public domain on Shabbat, but he landed after traveling 4, he is liable because part of the labor, what is intended to perform, was performed. So we said that's apply also in a Shem Mishimon. And the less halacha, nitkaven lizrok 4 וזרק 8. If one intends to throw an object 4 cubits in a public domain and landed traveling 8 cubits, is exempt because he's not intend to land there. But if he thought when throwing it that any place that the object wants to come to rest, let him come to rest, he's liable. So if one throws an object on Shabbat from one public domain to another public domain via private domain, he is liable if the object travel a total of 4 cubits or more in the 2 public domains. In that case, the private domain is irrelevant. And remember, the whole key of thinking in Shabbat is the melechet machshevet, which means what the person have in his mind, in his thought, when he did it. And it's very different than dinei nezikin.
Nafshi es Hashem